You're looking at rent prices that make you nauseous, telling yourself that all this money could be building equity instead. Every month, you hand over $2,000 to a landlord while your parents remind you they bought their house for what you spend on rent in 2 years. The math seems obvious. Renting is throwing money away, right? Except that's completely backwards right now, and I can prove it with numbers that will genuinely surprise you. Here's what nobody mentions when they're preaching the gospel of homeownership. The decision isn't just about monthly payments. It's about opportunity cost, hidden expenses, and market timing that could either build your wealth or absolutely demolish it. We're going to run the actual numbers on renting versus buying in today's market, and what you're about to see will probably make you question everything you thought you knew about building wealth through real estate. Let's start with a scenario that's playing out in dozens of American cities right now. You're paying $2,200 per month for a decent 2-bedroom apartment. Meanwhile, comparable houses in your area are selling for around $425,000. Your brain immediately does the math. That's $26,400 per year disappearing into your landlord's pocket. Surely buying has to be better. So you start researching mortgages. With 10% down, which is $42,500 you've somehow scraped together, you're looking at a loan of $382,500. At current interest rates hovering around 6.8%, your monthly payment lands at roughly $2,500. That's only $300 more than rent. Seems totally doable. But that $2,500 is a lie, not because the mortgage calculator is wrong, but because it's wildly incomplete. Property taxes on a $425,000 house run about $530 per month in most markets. Homeowners insurance, especially with recent climate disasters driving up premiums, adds another $280. Then there's maintenance, the thing everyone forgets until the water heater floods the basement at midnight. Standard guidance suggests budgeting 1% of your home's value annually for upkeep and repairs. That's $354 per month you need to set aside. Oh, and because you only put 10% down, you're paying PMI. Private mortgage insurance costs you an additional $265 monthly for the privilege of not being wealthy enough to drop 20% up front. Add it up, your real monthly cost of ownership is $3,929, not $2,500. Almost $4,000 to own a house that a mortgage calculator told you was affordable. Now the math gets uncomfortable. You're spending $1,729 more per month than if you just stayed in that rental. That's $20,748 per year over 5 years, assuming nothing major breaks and your property taxes don't increase, which they absolutely will. You're paying an extra $103,740 to own instead of rent. But you're building equity, right? That's the whole point. Let's examine what's actually happening to your money during those first 5 years. Of your $2,500 monthly mortgage payment, roughly $2,170 goes straight to interest in year 1. Only $330 is actually reducing your principal balance. You're not building wealth. You're paying the bank for the privilege of borrowing their money. Meanwhile, that $1,729 monthly difference between renting and the true cost of ownership could be doing something else entirely. If you invested that money in a basic index fund averaging 8% returns, which is conservative based on historical performance, you'd accumulate approximately $127,000 after 5 years. Compare that to the roughly $23,000 in equity you'd build through mortgage payments in the same time frame, and suddenly the rent versus buy equation looks radically different. Someone's going to mention appreciation. Houses go up in value. That rental just disappears into nothing. Fair point. Let's assume 4% annual appreciation on your $425,000 house. After 5 years, it's worth about $517,000. You've gained $92,000 in paper wealth, minus the $42,500 down payment you sank into it, minus the closing costs of around $12,000, minus the extra $103,740 you paid compared to renting. Do that math. Your net position after appreciation is actually negative compared to renting and investing, the difference. And we haven't even touched on the hidden costs that make this worse. When your furnace dies, that's $5,000 you didn't budget for. The roof needs replacing, there's another $15,000. Your HOA decides to repave the parking lot and assesses everyone $2,800. These aren't hypotheticals. They're the reality of ownership that turns your careful calculations into expensive surprises. But the real kicker, the part that changes everything about this comparison, comes down to one factor most people completely ignore when they're running these numbers: flexibility. When you rent, your money isn't locked into an illiquid asset you can't access without selling your entire living situation. You can relocate for a better job opportunity without agonizing over selling costs and market timing. You can walk away from a deteriorating neighborhood without losing your shirt. The renter maintains optionality. The homeowner has made a leveraged bet on one specific property in one specific location. Consider what happens when life actually happens. Your company relocates your position to another city. As a renter, you give notice and move. As a homeowner, you're looking at realtor commissions of 6%, which on that $425,000 house means $25,500 evaporates the moment you sell, plus closing costs, repairs to make the house marketable, and the very real possibility that you're selling in a down market because you don't have the luxury of waiting for conditions to improve. That equity you supposedly built? It just got consumed by the transaction costs of unwinding your position. Meanwhile, your invested rental savings remain completely liquid. You can access them immediately without permission from a bank or dependence on market conditions. Then there's the opportunity cost nobody discusses. That $42,500 down payment could have been invested the day you considered buying. 5 years at 8% returns turns that into $62,500. But instead, it's tied up in a house where it's generating returns only through appreciation and equity building, both of which we've established are slower than the market alternative. The psychological trap is that home equity feels like wealth because you can see it, walk through it, invite friends over to admire it. But illiquid equity you can't access without selling or taking on more debt isn't really wealth. It's potential wealth, locked behind transaction costs and market timing. This isn't even accounting for the time cost of ownership. Homeowners spend an average of 24 hours per month on property maintenance, yard work, repairs, and dealing with contractors. That's 288 hours annually, or 7 full work weeks of unpaid labor maintaining an asset. Assign any reasonable value to your time, and suddenly ownership carries an additional invisible cost that never appears in the rent versus buy calculators. What about the tax benefits everyone mentions? Yes, you can deduct mortgage interest and property taxes, but with the standard deduction now at $27,700 for married couples, most homeowners don't itemize anymore. You're not getting the tax advantage you think you are, and even if you do itemize, you're getting a deduction, not a credit. You're reducing your taxable income, not getting free money. If you're in the 22% tax bracket and you deduct $15,000 in mortgage interest, you're saving $3,300 in taxes. That's real money, but it's not anywhere close to offsetting the actual costs of ownership. The sobering reality is that for most people, in most markets, with most financial situations, buying a $425,000 house costs significantly more than renting an equivalent property over a 5 to 7 year period, not slightly more. Dramatically more. The break-even point where ownership starts making financial sense typically occurs somewhere between years 8 and 12, depending on appreciation rates and how aggressively you could have invested the difference. Which means buying only makes mathematical sense if you're absolutely certain you'll stay in that specific house for at least a decade. How many people buying their first home today can honestly say they know where they'll want to live in 2036? Your career will change. Your family situation will evolve. Your preferred neighborhood will transform. Locking yourself into one location for a decade based on a financial calculation that barely breaks even is a gamble disguised as prudent adulting. The rent versus buy decision isn't really about monthly payments. It's about liquidity versus leverage, flexibility versus forced savings, and whether you're willing to pay a significant premium for the psychological comfort of ownership. Sometimes that premium is worth it, but pretending it doesn't exist or that homeownership is automatically the wealth-building choice does nobody any favors. Run your actual numbers, factor in your real opportunity cost, then decide if owning that $425,000 house is an investment or just an expensive lifestyle choice you're justifying with bad math. Mobility. That's the factor that demolishes the homeownership argument in today's market. Your career isn't static. The average person changes jobs every 4 years now. Sometimes that means relocating. Sometimes it means taking a position across town where your commute suddenly becomes unbearable. As a renter, you adapt, you move, you optimize. As a homeowner, you're trapped by selling costs that make every relocation decision agonizing. Selling a house costs roughly 10% of its value when you factor in realtor commissions, closing costs, repairs to make it marketable, and the staging your agent insists you need. On that $425,000 house, you're looking at $42,500 just to exit your position. That's your entire down payment, gone before you've made a single dollar of profit. Meanwhile, renters maintain perfect flexibility. Better job offer in another city. Give your 30-day notice. Neighborhood deteriorating. Move somewhere better next month. Housing market crashes. Not your problem. You haven't bet your financial future on one specific property in one specific location at one specific point in time. This mobility advantage compounds in ways most people never calculate. That job opportunity you can't take because selling your house would be too complicated. That's potentially tens of thousands in lost lifetime earnings. The toxic work environment you stay in because moving would mean selling at a loss. That's your mental health and career trajectory taking hits that don't show up in any rent versus buy calculator. And here's what really twists the knife. The same people telling you to buy are the ones who benefited from a completely different economic reality. Your parents bought when houses cost 3 times their annual income. You're buying when houses cost 6 to 8 times your income. They got 3% mortgages. You're stuck with 7%. They had employers offering pensions. You're funding your own retirement while servicing massive debt. The game changed. The math changed. But the advice stayed frozen in 1985 when buying actually was the obvious choice for building wealth. Look at what's happening right now in markets across the country. People who bought at the peak in 2021 and 2022 are underwater or barely breaking even after just 3 years. They're trapped in houses they can't afford to sell, working jobs they hate because they can't relocate, watching their supposed investment become an anchor. That's not wealth building. That's financial prison with a mortgage. The truth is, renting isn't throwing money away any more than paying for food is throwing money away. You're purchasing a service, housing, flexibility, the freedom to make decisions based on what's best for your life instead of what's best for your underwater asset. Does this mean you should never buy? No. It means you should buy when the math actually works, not because society has convinced you that renting past 30 means you've failed at adulting. Buy when you're certain about your location for the next decade. Buy when you can comfortably afford it without sacrificing your ability to invest and build liquid wealth. Buy when appreciation potential and rent savings actually justify the transaction costs and opportunity cost. But right now, in this market, with these interest rates and these prices, renting and investing, the difference isn't just defensible. For most people, it's the mathematically superior choice. And pretending otherwise because homeownership feels like what adults are supposed to do is how you end up house poor, stressed, and watching your wealthier peers who kept renting build actual financial freedom while you're trapped by equity you can't access without selling your entire life.